I find this report to be very useful. Again, otherwise nobody ever goes back and look at them. And this gives us at least a tool for doing things. Let's see here. Other things that we can put in here. You saw they activate Chuck Norris. That's a big fun one. You can do email notifications when the builds break. Basically, it'll send out to you either a described list, or if it can track back who did the check-in, it will tell you. Mostly in our environment, because we have so many cascading jobs, is everybody just gets spammed. So I'm not terribly convinced the email is useful for us. We're running so many builds. They intermittently go and fail, so we tend to use our stand-ups. I basically tell people to check in, go check it periodically, and then during our stand-up meetings, we'll pull through what's broken and make sure somebody's actually chasing things down. Emotional Hudson is just, again, the same kind of idea. If it's broken or if it's working, change the logo. Build other projects. So basically, when this one finishes, go fire this stuff off. And there's dozens of hundreds of other ones that you can do in here. If this is a job that actually generates test results, let's see here. Let's go find a job that has a test. You can tell it to go scan for JUnit XML files, and it'll automatically build the chart for you. There's other ones in here. You can actually do the code complexity and other types of things within here. All of this stuff can get into these displays and put them where you want to use them. I mentioned before about just doing custom HTML reports. That's the one I showed you earlier. We occasionally do more interesting things with builds. So I'm going to show you one other thing that's useful. Test report generation. I mentioned we have quality problems in our quality testing tool. One of the things that we were trying to find out is were we dealing with just intermittent tests or tests that were continuously broken. So we actually write all of our test reports to also a database. That's some custom code that we wrote. And then I have a report that grabs the last 10 results and will indicate whether they passed or failed, so that we can look at them by job or by test and actually find out, are they working. So a case where something might have just intermittently failed, you know what, we'll just wait and see if it comes back, or can see some of the history on whether or not it's failing. This is a set of tests that are continuously broken. Hopefully it's something that's just new development versus anything else. So you can occasionally see when things are broken, when tests have just been running periodically, things of that nature. So let's get back to the presentation. Configuration. Testing. Testing, unit tests, integration tests, system tests. There's a lot of different things out there that will run your tests. From code testing, you've got XUnit, JUnit, NUnit, and all the permutations. There's UI testing tools. Most of the ones that I prefer, if you have it, access the accessibility layer. At least if you're on Windows, you can test on Windows. Microsoft's accessibility layer will allow you to dig down into some of the documents and in some of the nodes to actually check the controls and their values. That's what a lot of the UI testing tools do out there. Image and placement testing is scary if your UI is at all about changing, just because it's tedious and there's a lot more timing issues. Custom scripts, frameworks, and simulators. When we did phone testing, we had to write our own. We had to write code that drove calls, turn them off, stop. Testing results, I like to get things into the JUnit XML file structure. It's not a very well-documented one, but you can get it out there. And as I said, there's lots of tools out there that'll do it. Other things that it's good to track is test counts, how many of them you got. If you can get test code coverage out of there, code coverage is very useful. Code coverage, in my mind, it's nice to hit a magic number. I tend to not be as concerned about it. If I've seen a project that's getting between 65% and up, they usually have a fair amount of tests. It's easy to hit 20 or 30%, it only takes usually a few tests. As you go up from 65 to 75 to 85, it gets progressively harder as you go down error paths. I tend to like to use code coverage as part of a code review. Most of the tools that support it will allow you to bring up the source code and actually indicate whether or not it's covered in the test. So that way you can intelligently look at it and go, okay, these are just low level. If there's a bizarre exception here, let's just catch it and deal with it. Don't know if it actually could happen, but we'll catch it and have error handling. So there's a lot of those. It'll also find dead code. There's been times when we pulled in code from other projects or other vendors into our work, and you slowly spend months weeding out all the dead code. Testing advice, again, more developer focused, but write quality test cases as they become harder to maintain the product. You get lots of them. They spend a lot of time fixing them when things break. UI tests in particular. You add things into the workflow on a regular basis as you develop UIs. Provide good feedback when working and failing test steps. The ideal test tests one thing. I've never found that to be practical. Because the test setup time and run times are so long, you end up testing a workflow and you end up testing a lot of paths on a workflow at any given time. At least when it fails, what was it doing? How did it get there? Usually if a test fails, do you really want it to take down the rest of all your tests? It's hard to run in a completely green environment all the time. I've got a lot of developers that are always doing things. They can't run all the tests at their desk at the same time, so they don't always know when they break things. So if a test fails, it should clean up after itself, so that the next test that executes is testing in a clean environment. That can be tough when you've got real-world timing delays. Phones, you can't just hang it up and pick it up right again. You've got to wait a little while, or you've got to deal with it. Those resets can be very, very hard and take a lot of code. They can often get more complicated than the product you're building first. Integration and testing frameworks, I mentioned, are more complicated. Some of the worst ones I've had is that we've always underestimated what it takes to build a good testing framework in simulation environments. We always find that we're having to do more. It's the nature of our business that we're often having to use simulators to build things. My last project before this, or a recent project before this, was a predictive dialer. It had to mesh in and see what was every agent in the call center, what it was doing. It also had to call out to hundreds of thousands of people at a time. We had to write a simulator to deal with a lot of those factors. You're writing a simulator, you're trying to write and test this in production. And you're trying to write automated test cases for something that's literally evolving based on real-time data. So it gets very, very difficult to test those kinds of components. You can't just fire them off in the real world. Well, you could, you just didn't know a lot of people like that. And yes, I'm ashamed to admit I have written a predictive dialer. Yes, well deserved. Let's see, publish HTML reports. I think we covered some of these when I had a display. Actually, this one I didn't show you. This is just the settings file for we have our own custom job. This is one runs displays the JVM.xml file in the graph. The one above it is just writing a report that our code generates. And you can have as many as you want. If you've got things that can scan through your test results and generate some data on it, maybe that's performance time, how long things ran, other kinds of data you want to collect on it, you can just add them all as HTML reports. It doesn't take much programming and scripting knowledge to generate HTML. Metrics. Collect what's important and what's useful. Most data is valuable only as a trend. I tend to find that. Shot data is good. I mean, code coverage, yeah. I'm not hung up on magic numbers. I just tend to find that when you go look into them, there's reasons of why they are. And when people are trying to hit magic numbers, they just do things to hit magic numbers, and they stop looking at, am I really covering and testing the right stuff? I just need to hit, I need to hit 100%, I did good. It's important to actually look at the data and dive into it periodically. Unless you have a tool that captures what you want, build your own, and format it your own way. We saw earlier, Sonar is a really nice one. Sometimes it lays out things the way I want, sometimes it doesn't. I've cheated at different times. I'll write small applications that grab data and generate HTML. I like to shove things into databases. Again, very basic database code. There's a lot of things out there in command line tools to allow you to insert rows into a database. You take data, you parse it, shove it into a database with a date, timestamp, and then if you don't know your programming, grab Excel, point it at the database. You can suck down the table and generate a graph. It's fairly easy. A lot of these things are things that can be done on the side. And then again, review the data. If you don't review it, it doesn't matter. This is just one bit of some of the data off our metrics. This is our UI project. So we're around a little bit over 100,000 lines of executable code. So that's all comments and blank lines stripped out. You get artifacts that occur, and then you get to explain to your bosses why there's artifacts. So you notice it goes up, and then it drops, and then it starts creeping up again. We discovered as we were going along that we're writing in Silverlight, so the Visual Studio and the Blend tool was generating some dummy code as it was going along that was getting caught in Source Monitor, which is where we were used to track it. So we didn't have our filters right. And once we discovered it was capturing code that we didn't want, we saw a big drop. It's not necessarily a great metric because XAML is just XML that's generated by Blend, but it also gives you a sense of how much content in the XAML or the layout language that Microsoft is using. So again, it gives you a sense of it. Test counts, so those are unit test counts. What we got here, around 2,500. Our integration test counts are what, approaching on maybe 450, 400, something like that. The system test counts, if you notice, are flat and down to data. I mentioned that they were being kicked off manually. It's showing up in some of our other metrics, but we haven't modified the scripts that actually shove the data into the database. The system test counts get covered. QA focuses on them very heavily. So Eric, the person who spoke with the keynote, they generate other reports where he's also got a combination of how many system tests do we have, how many are manual, how many are automated. The reason for the whiskey, when we first started the project, our development product owner in Chicago is very much a Scotch fan. And so he figured out a way to come up with acronyms for each team names, where one could be called a whiskey and the other could be called something. So we sort of embraced that. My vice president is obviously something bad happened, but it returned back. It could have been something simply somebody broke something and moved it, or it could have been something that happened actually within the test itself. Again, it's worth writing these things up. This is Cobertura. It was mentioned earlier. It's a Java code coverage tool. I like it. NCover for Silverlight, I think, just came out, or a version of NCover that worked with Silverlight just came out a couple months ago. And I've got it on my budget, and hopefully we'll get it in sometime next year. It's a nice tool. It shows you a little bit what's going on inside your project. But this one's a tool we wrote 5 or 6 years ago. It's actually a VoiceXML test tool. So it emulates an IVR that's executing VoiceXML and goes and spiders an application and basically does automated testing. So this is one of the first projects that we applied automated testing in CI to. So this automatically gets generated every time. All the test results from all the unit tests are all merged together. Code coverage on it is pretty low. It's 67, but a large chunk of the code base comes from a third-party vendor. Am I out of time already, Bob?
You're fine, Jim. We lost the camera. I didn't find it.
Thinking about your CIM infrastructure, it's a general purpose. Think of it as a general purpose trigger and scheduling tool. What I mean by that is it doesn't have to involve code. It watches things. It can be watching as version control. It can be watching Twitter. It can be watching whatever you want, and then do stuff for you. So it's a general purpose scheduler that can provide you feedback on what's going on. It can be a reporting and metrics hub, whatever that site means for you. It's a good place where you can just have a job that just lists out all the information that you want to see. It doesn't have to be singular. And what I mean by that is right now on my team and on my last 3 projects, we've only had one CI server, or at least one master CI server for the project. You can definitely stage them and looking at them in a couple of different ways. So one, you can have different CI servers for each of the different versions of the product you have to support. You may also do them in staged. Localized team uses one build server, it then promotes out to another. Our team in Chicago that I mentioned earlier, we do promote out to them, but they use cruise control. So we basically, when we build, they actually send us a request to do a build of our product, and then we feed them back our build when it's done. So we've basically got a staged build across a couple thousand miles. And let's see, different versions. So parting advice. Treat your CI environment as a core part of your project. You will spend time on it. You need to allocate and work in it. If you're scrumming or build tasks that you have to do with it. Otherwise, you'll just never get to it. Multiple people should understand your CI system. Knowledge is power. Metrics, Project Insight are things helpful where they're working. Use it carefully. They also become political tools for those that have to deal with that stuff, like myself as a manager. Data doesn't have to be pretty focused on the content. Those HTML reports I did, I wrote some of those myself, and I did them and kick them off in an afternoon. The goal was not to be pretty. It was just grab some images off the web, write some logic, spill it out. I wanted people able to see the data. If my team can see the data, they'll typically act on it. If they have to go digging for new information, it tends not to get noticed. So I try to focus on getting it out there. Big red lights if it doesn't work, green lights if it does. I also try to massage it to what they actually asked for. They actually the ones that asked for the showing me the history of the test, because they were finding in stand-ups, they were digging into tests that were just being intermittently failing. The test framework I mentioned 6 months ago was very, very bad for us. We didn't know what was causing all the failures. We've since segmented it and got to a point of stability, but there was a period of time where 80–90% of our failures had nothing to do with our own code. Continuously improve, it's a general statement. Allocate time to improve. Look at your data, look at what you want to improve. Every time I begin a new project over the last couple of years, I sit down and review my tools and figure out which ones I can change out or at least experiment with or look at doing new things. Don't let process or metrics make you stupid. I have to actually write this on the board to some of my employees. Focus your goals on how to get there. What I mean by that is, you heard earlier in the stand-up, our transition into some of the process things we did was painful. There are times that I will see people, it's like, fine, if I just do it this way, they'll be happy. QA will look right off and accept my story. And I have to tell them at some points, yes, but if you can go back and say, what's our goal? We can have recraft the problem, reframe it. Usually they're okay. They want the same goal as you. They want a quality product. They want it to do what we're supposed to do. But it's just that battle. People get busy. People try to say, well, if I just do it this way, then everyone will be happy. And I go, yeah, but does it solve the problem? Well, no, but I'm done. No. It's a statement of mine. There isn't enough time to do everything. Prioritize. But one subnote to that. Figure out how much things you're doing, that things are going to take, so that you know if things are going to get caught at the edge, you would not start them if you're not going to finish them in a time that makes sense. So try not to start something that there's a chance you may not finish it. Pick something, 3 things that are smaller that you maybe can get done. We fight this all the time. I mentioned we're an acquisition company. Everyone can feel the pain of not having any money to spend budgets. Very much we tend to run as with big enterprise products, but with skeleton crews on a lot of those smart about how we spend our time. We can't waste it on something that we won't finish. It's both easier and harder than it appears. Setting up these Jenkins, you can download it, you can probably get a basic thing up and going in an afternoon. Getting it to do all the stuff you want can take years. Treat it as such. Go at it incrementally, try to get by 100. Do these things in parallel to what you're already using. Your infrastructure needs to be reliable enough to be trusted. Remember I mentioned that I've been in pain from a test tool. When people stop trusting the environment, they stop looking at the little red lights and things that go along with it. So did I generate any questions? I put them all to sleep.
Can you say that first part again?
Questions?
No, the first part of the presentation.
So, I don't know if I said it when I began. The main reason I'm up here is obviously I'm not selling anything or any services. I used to work with Bob. Bob was the QA person assigned to me on the Voyager project, which is that voice XML testing tool. Bob and I spent a great deal arguing about what our process meant and what we were supposed to do. Bob, what was my favorite line?
What are you trying to achieve?
Yes.
I still use it today.